I would have instances where people would touch my hair or my skin. So shout out to my squad who not only helped me survive, but really helped me thrive. Wagwan everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a little bit long overdue and highly requested video. I thought I would share with you basically my experience living in South Korea. I lived in South Korea for about 3 years, from the period of 2018 to the end of 2020. A while back I did a little poll on my Instagram and asked you guys to pop in some questions and suggestions of what you'd like to hear about my experience, because you know there's a whole lot to cover. Now before we begin, I do want to preface these experiences are my own, that I actually went through while living there, so it's not a direct reflection of everyone's experience obviously, so please keep that in mind before you proceed to watch the rest of the video. I got into Korean culture initially through the music, K-pop, K-hip-hop, K-R&B, and from there I became interested in the language, which led me to join up a Korean language academy here in Melbourne. Shout out to my Korean language academy, you were the best. So I ended up going there and studying the language for about a year. The amazing thing about this Korean language academy was that it wasn't just going there and doing my studies. We also celebrated Korean events, Korean cultural celebrations and things like that, really like encompassed a lot of the Korean tradition, like Seoll날, Chuseok. We got to enjoy that together, and that just made me get more and more into the culture. So around the same time that I was going to this Korean language academy, I was finishing up my undergraduate degree, and I was kind of going through a phase where I got to finish my degree and I really didn't have an interest in getting into my field at that stage. I just needed a little bit of a break, something different, something to challenge myself. And through friends and people at my Korean language academy, I came to find out the opportunities to move to South Korea through the method of ESL teaching. So I did some research, actually I did a lot of research, and I found that that was the most viable option for me. Just a quick rundown of how it works. Usually if you want to be an ESL teacher in South Korea, you need to have a minimum of a bachelor's degree in anything. It doesn't have to be related to teaching. It would make your chances better if you had at least some sort of teaching certification, like a TEFL. You also have to be from one of the 7 recognized English-speaking countries. There was 2 ways for me to be able to actually apply for jobs. So you can either apply directly through schools, so which makes it a little bit hard for someone like me who obviously had no experience in teaching, had no experience of the process. It was my first time in a foreign country like Korea, etc. Or you can apply through a third party like an agency, and the agency actually will do the work on your behalf, where they will match you up with suitable schools based on your experience and I guess their needs. Some of these agencies also, they do support you all the way from, you know, the application process to actually moving there. It really helps for first timers who are trying to move to South Korea. I would recommend personally going through an agency, but please be aware of the agency that you go through, because there are some scams, so keep that in mind. So that being said, I was fortunate enough to find a legitimate agency that were so supportive. They answered all my questions and were so helpful, because I was going through it. I was like stressing for no reason. Then they proceeded to send out my resume to schools suitable to my qualifications. After about a month of applications, including, you know, finding the agency and waiting for them to put out my CV to particular schools and stuff, I did a Skype interview with this school, and it must have gone well, because a few days later I find out from my agency and through the school eventually that I got a job offer with that school. I was so happy because this school was within my second preferred location. Busan was my second preference, and it's the second largest city, so it really worked out in my favor that the school was in Busan. And then between the time of me getting the actual job offer and moving to Korea, it was about a month process, only because I had to wait for a lot of certification. If you would like to know more about what type of specific documentation you need to do this kind of work, let me know in the comments, and I might be able to do that in another video talking a bit more about the technical stuff. Like I said, I was really fortunate to have my agency really support me. Even after I got the job offer, they helped me put the documentation together, and also my liaison at the school, who was so great. Shout out to Rachel. And the thing is also, for South Korea, a lot of the processes and things like that cater to Americans and Canadians. I felt like there was a lot of information that I had to seek out myself, so keep that in mind. I think it's just because of demand. There's more. What was it like to actually live in South Korea? So the school that I was working with, based off my qualifications, being a first-time teacher, didn't really have a specific degree in teaching or anything like that. I was getting about $2,000 a month. I was able to thankfully live quite comfortably. Another perk of being an ESL teacher in South Korea is they provide you with housing or housing allowance, and they cover rent a lot of the time. Only thing I had to pay for was actually bills, you know, electricity, water, internet, whatever, and groceries and things like that. Luckily, it was quite cheap. And in terms of food and food items, honestly, if you're someone that's really open to Korean food and Korean products, or you're just open to trying new things, then you're gonna be fine, because I found that a lot of the Korean items, obviously, and Korean dishes were cheap. But if you're trying to look like foreign products, things that you would find normally at home, and you want to go seeking out for that, it might be a little bit more on the expensive side in comparison. So I would say, like, be prepared to kind of be flexible, be adaptable. That's very, very important, I think, when you move to somewhere that's a completely different culture to the one that you're used to. And things like other non-food items, Daiso gang, what's the... They're not like the Daiso stores here. The Daiso stores in South Korea were a lot more bigger, and there's just so many more things. So I was very fortunate enough to have a Daiso right down the road from me. And I found that that was my go-to for anything non-food related. Literally, my house was decorated in Daiso items. Also, a great thing I found there as well was the expat community. Other foreigners living there. There's a high, like, going and coming of foreigners. So it was very common to have people, you know, giving away items or wanting to get rid of their items, and that was very handy when you need something that can't find easily in Korea, or you know, for someone like me who I got black girl hair needs, so it was really handy to have people there. I had things that they brought either from back home, or they were leaving and they wanted to get rid of their things, so it was really, really handy. Transport was super cheap and super reliable. It's very efficient. It's another level. And I had someone ask me about clothes. Again, it's just about like seeking out certain stores, but also being open to trying different styles that may not be necessarily the style that you're used to. Korean fashion is another level of quality. You can definitely find a lot of affordable clothing. The only thing I should preface though is it caters to obviously the main body demographic, which is small and petite. So for our curvy girls, unfortunately, it is a little bit trickier to find items, but you can always do online shopping, which, yeah, that's the only thing that I would have to complain about, I guess. This one's a bit of a deep one. The Korean culture, aka K-wave, became really poppin' via means of Korean dramas, K-pop, K-fashion, K-beauty, etc. from the mid-2000s. I personally think that it popped off a lot in the past couple of years, from what I've noticed, through the means of like K-pop groups like BTS and Korean movies just reaching worldwide acclaim. That being said, Korea is still predominantly a homogenous country. Hey everyone, this is Milena editing, and I just realized in this part I said homogeneous when the word is actually homogeneous, so please ignore that. Swiftly moving on. With 99% of the population being of Korean ethnic background. So it's natural that discrimination and racism are prevalent, especially because there's not as much exposure, particularly in smaller cities that aren't Seoul or Busan. Also, I found that among the older community, they haven't had as much exposure to people like me or foreigners in general. It's very natural for them to be quite curious. I would have instances where people would touch my hair or my skin or make comments, even in public spaces like public transport and things like that, which again, coming into it, be prepared for that because it is a foreign country. You're a foreigner in a foreign country, so it's natural for there to be curiosity. Whereas the incident involving the younger generation or peer groups within my age, I didn't really excuse, just because this is the same generation that has access to internet and internet trends, and we're very quick to jump on particular trends that showcase what they thought it meant to be Black, but not so quick to accept Black people as equals. And also me being Eritrean, it added, I think, another element, because a lot of the time the association with being Black in South Korea, I found, was associated with African Americans, because again, that's the main exposure that they've had. It goes all the way back to Korean War time. So it added another element. Identifying as an Eritrean, Australian, I think there was layers to it that made my experience a little bit more isolating sometimes, distance, because I was a minority within a minority, you know? Obviously, researching and actually living in a country is going to be a completely different experience, so keep that in mind. Also, language barrier. Like I said, I had been studying Korean for about a year beforehand. Although my Korean language skills were very basic, conversational, I could read and write, but it was very, very basic, and that kind of played into somewhat of an obstacle for someone who, like me, finds strength in communication. To have that stripped away from you can sometimes be a little bit more challenging, right? It definitely helped me, I'm not gonna lie, but also sometimes it didn't really do much to kind of help with the experiences of discrimination that I encountered. Because again, like when people see you, the first thing they're gonna see is how you look, and especially in a place like Korea where first impressions are key in the way of life. But I was so grateful again to be in a place like Busan, being the second largest city. You are able to get around if you have, you know, low Korean skills or no Korean skills, really. And we have the beauty of the internet, where translation apps like Papago were my life. I feel like there's so much to cover, but some of the major ones that stood out to me: societal values. So things like honoring your family, respecting your elder, that aligned a lot more with my Eritrean identity, but not so much with the Australian typical values that we see here on the day-to-day basis. Another thing is beauty standards. Now, every country I feel like has their own beauty standards, but at what extreme these standards are followed is very subjective, right? I felt that the Korean beauty standards were a bit more on the extreme, kind of problematic side, because it affected people's ability to get jobs, self-esteem, build relationships, and just overall success in life. Having been a teacher and teaching young, impressionable minds, it was crazy to see how much these beauty standards really dictated their way of thinking, their overall being, you know, so to speak. And the third major difference that I found was personal space. Everyone was very much about personal space, kind of keeping to yourself. You know, they won't be the first ones to approach you, basically. Even with like everyday small talk, things like that. Maybe also, again, the language barrier comes into play in this. Even if you were to leave your phone in a public space, people aren't really going to touch it. If you left your wallet on the bus, you know, there's more chance you're gonna find it there again, because a lot of the time I found people were very much about not getting involved and very much on their own tip, but yet still upholding a sense of community, which was a very interesting kind of balance to be accustomed to. Overall, I think when you move to a new country that's different to where you've grown up, especially by yourself, stepping outside your comfort zone, it's a great opportunity for you to challenge and reinvent yourself. And that's what I found the most incredible part about my experience, because when I was going there, I was young, naive, sometimes dumb as F, especially because it was my first experience living out of home in a foreign country by myself. It was such a beautiful way for me to grow, get a worldly experience, a different perspective of what it means to be in another part of the world that's completely different to what I've known. And being an international kid growing up, I have lived in different countries, still this being completely different and me doing it on my own, it was a surreal experience. I was supposed to go there for 1 year and I ended up staying there for almost 3 years, so that can tell you a little bit about how much I enjoyed my experience there, no matter how challenging, no matter how isolating it was at times, but made me more aware of who I am in this world. It made me more aware of people around me. So my advice, if you're planning to move to South Korea or anywhere really, or to do something similar, go in there with an open mind. Be ready to be adaptable, flexible. Don't be afraid to meet people, try new things, and take Jesus with you. I know it's not always easy for everybody, but I really found comfort in my little squad, Boos of the Boo, you know who you are, my Korea gang, having a community there, because we were essentially each other's family. As much as we were there kind of on our own from different walks of life, on our own journeys, still helps to have a good community that you can kind of find comfort in, being so far away from home. And that was the most beautiful thing about it. Meeting people, meeting my partner. So shout out to my squad who not only helped me survive, but really helped me thrive. Y'all really made it the best experience of my life. Can you hear the birds? They're telling me to wrap this up. Wow, y'all loud. Are y'all done? Is you done? Anyway, that's it folks for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that was informative. If you guys have any further questions, I'll put any like relevant links and things like that down below if required. If there's anything in particular that you wanted me to talk about, you want me to kind of clarify on, or I could do a separate video on specific topics if you need, let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. I am Milena B, sending you love and light. Until my next video, we out.